What are you actually looking at right now? There's a lizard on the water. Not near it. On it. Mid-river, legs driving fast, body upright, not sinking, not skimming. Running. The surface holds. You assume it's a trick of light, the angle of the camera, maybe a shallow section you can't see. Then you notice the calm. This animal is not panicking. Its head is level, its stride is even, and it covers nearly 4 meters before touching the water with its belly. And even then, it switches to swimming without breaking rhythm. 2 more appear, then more. This is real, and speed alone doesn't explain it. The river in question runs through lowland tropical forest in Central America, Costa Rica, Panama, Honduras, stretches of Colombia's Pacific coast. Dense canopy closes above it, roots tangle the banks, and the air sits heavy and wet regardless of the hour. To a human walking this terrain, the river looks like an obstacle, a border, something you cross at the shallowest point and avoid otherwise. To the common basilisk, Basilisks basilisks, the river is the most important feature of its entire home range, and not for the reason you're probably thinking. The basilisk lives at the edge, almost never deeper than a few meters from open water. It moves through low vegetation, basks on branches that overhang the surface, forages for insects and small animals in the undergrowth, and keeps at least one exit option, pointed toward water at almost every moment. The habitat looks dense and chaotic from the outside. For the basilisk, it is a carefully read environment. Cover here, heat there, water within reach in every direction. The river isn't scenery. It's the architecture the animal organizes its life around. The first time you see the footage, the obvious answer feels satisfying. Speed, like skipping a stone. If you move fast enough, your momentum carries you before gravity wins. The basilisk hits the water at a dead sprint, and for a few seconds, physics seems to cooperate. That much is genuinely true. Speed is necessary. A basilisk that slows below a certain threshold sinks. The mechanics of the run require sustained momentum, and the animal commits fully to every stride. If you stop there, the explanation feels complete. A very fast lizard running very fast on water. Done. Except flat feet moving fast through water generate drag, not lift. Water's in a runway that rewards speed with support. It's a fluid that resists sudden downward force and eventually yields to it. Every footfall is a new negotiation with physics, and momentum alone predicts a slower sinking rate, not a sustained surface run. If speed were the full answer, the basilisk should slow, settle, and submerge. It doesn't, for several meters at least. Something at each footfall is generating upward force. The question changes from how fast the lizard moves to what its feet are doing to the water at the exact moment they make contact. Look at the feet. When a basilisk runs on water, the scales along its toes, thin laterally keeled structures, splay outward into fringes. The foot you see resting on a branch is narrower than the foot that hits the water. At the moment of contact, that foot is measurably wider, creating a larger surface area against the water than the bare toes alone would provide. It's a visible change, and it's one of the first things researchers noticed when they started studying the behavior in detail. Wider foot, more contact area, less sinking per stride. It makes sense, and it's real, but it's still not the answer. A wider flat surface pressed into water still sinks. Increased area slows the descent, it doesn't reverse it. When researchers at Harvard pointed high-speed cameras at basilisks running across water, what they saw in slow motion changed the picture completely. The foot doesn't press down on the surface, it penetrates it. Here's what happens in the fraction of a second that each foot contacts the water. The foot accelerates downward at nearly a vertical angle and strikes the surface with enough force to displace water outward. In that instant, a small air-filled cavity opens around the foot, water pushed aside, air rushing in, a temporary pocket of nothing surrounding the point of contact. The foot is now inside the water column, but it's also partially enclosed by that air cavity. As the stride continues, the foot pushes backward through the water in a rowing motion, and the walls of the collapsing cavity, water rushing back in, push upward and inward against the foot. That reaction force drives the body up. Not by much and not for long, but enough. Then the foot must exit the water before the cavity fully collapses, because a foot trapped inside a closing pocket of water gets dragged downward rather than lifted. Recovery, the upswing of the leg, must happen before the cavity closes. Slow the whole thing down in your mind. Slap. The foot strikes. Cavity opens, fringes spread. Stroke. The foot pushes back. Cavity walls react. Body rises fractionally. Recovery. The foot exits before collapse, already moving toward the next stride. The other foot is already mid-slap before the first one lifts. The entire cycle, from contact to recovery, takes somewhere in the range of 65 to 100 milliseconds. That's roughly the duration of a camera flash, and it happens 4 to 6 times per second during a full-speed water run. This is not surface tension. That needs to be said clearly because surface tension is the first guess almost everyone makes, the water strider explanation. A water strider works because it weighs almost nothing and distributes that weight across the surface film using hydrophobic legs. Surface tension scales with contact length, not mass. A water strider can weigh a fraction of a gram and stay supported. A fully grown basilisk can weigh several hundred grams. The math doesn't work. The basilisk is not floating on the surface. It is briefly, repeatedly, creating its own launch platform inside the water column and abandoning it before it disappears. Now watch a juvenile do it. A young basilisk, small enough that its entire body is barely longer than your hand, hits the water and keeps going, well past the distance an adult would cover before sinking. The mechanism is identical. Same slap, same cavity, same stroke, same recovery. The difference is mass. A lighter animal places less downward load on each cavity, which means the upward reaction force from the collapsing walls is proportionally more effective. The physics favor the small. A juvenile basilisk may cover twice the water distance that a large adult can manage before sinking becomes inevitable, and not because it's a better runner, because it weighs less. This creates an odd relationship between age and the ability. Young basilisks, the animals most at risk, the ones with no size or experience to draw on, are the most effective water runners in the species. As they grow, as they gain mass and strength and territorial experience, the mechanism gradually becomes less reliable over distance. An adult basilisk running on water is heavier, and 4 meters of open water is close to the practical limit before the stride loses enough upward force to keep the body above the surface. And that limit sounds like a flaw. It isn't. To understand why, you have to ask the question the footage never seems to raise. Where's the basilisk going? Watch the run again, not just the movement, the destination. Where does the lizard actually go? It runs out onto the water, covers 3 to 5 meters, slows, sinks to swimming, and, in many documented cases, circles back toward the bank it started from, or stops in shallow water among roots and vegetation near the edge. It doesn't cross the river. It doesn't reach the other side. It reaches a point roughly 4 meters from the bank, and it stops caring. The basilisk is not trying to cross the water. Water is not the destination. What it is a barrier. An emergency barrier that the lizard can enter, and most of its predators cannot follow across. The large snakes that hunt basilisks at the water's edge, boa constrictors, large colubrids, are capable swimmers. But they do not chase a sprinting basilisk across open water in most documented scenarios. Birds of prey that take basilisks from branches need open airspace and strike angles that disappear once the lizard is moving horizontally across water. Terrestrial mammals, coatis, raccoons, are not water runners. The moment the basilisk hits the surface, it has moved from the predator's terrain to a zone that most threats cannot enter quickly or efficiently. It only needs to buy meters, not minutes. 3 to 4 meters of open water between itself and the bank may be enough for the predator to give up. The distance limit isn't a design problem. It's sized for the actual threat. The mechanism doesn't need to carry the lizard across a river. It needs to carry it past the point where the snake stops, the hawk peels off, the mammal hesitates at the bank. 4 meters accomplishes that. The adult basilisk sinking after 4 meters is an animal that has already won. This also reframes everything about the basking behavior you'd observe in the early morning. Basilisks are ectothermic. Their body temperature rises and falls with the environment around them. A cold basilisk runs slower. A basilisk that can't reach the speed threshold for water running can't form the air cavities effectively, which means the stride doesn't generate enough upward force, which means it sinks in the first step. Basking on branches above the river in the early morning isn't resting, it's preparation. A basilisk that spends 40 minutes in the morning sun before moving into the undergrowth is a basilisk whose muscles are warm enough to sprint hard enough to run on water if it has to. That behavioral choice has a direct mechanical consequence downstream. The predators know this in the sense that behavior has shaped behavior over a long time. Some of the animals that hunt basilisks are most active in the early morning, when the lizards are still cold, slow, and less able to sprint to water effectively. The contest between hunter and hunted isn't fixed. It shifts with temperature, with time of day, with how far the basilisk is from the bank when the encounter begins. The question isn't which animal wins. The question is what conditions produce which outcome. A basilisk caught far from water on a cool morning is a different situation than a basilisk flushed from a branch into open river at noon. The other basilisk species, the plumed basilisk, the brown basilisk, the red-headed basilisk, all water run. The plumed basilisk has the most dramatic body crests, which are display structures that have nothing to do with the run itself. The brown basilisk is smaller and lighter, and the physics favor it proportionally more. But Basiliscus basiliscus, the common basilisk, is the one that ended up most studied, partly because it is the most frequently encountered near human settlement, near tourist infrastructure, near the researchers who pointed slow-motion cameras at it in the first place. The comparison that sometimes comes up, the Western grebe, is worth a brief stop because it shows how different the solutions can be to a similar-looking problem. Western grebes also run on water, but for courtship display, not predator escape. They use synchronized pair running at high leg frequency with partially webbed feet that work differently than basilisk toe fringes. No air cavity formation, no slap stroke recovery cycle. The same visual result, an animal running on water produced by a completely different physics. Convergent appearance, divergent mechanism. The basilisk's solution is not the only way biology found to put a vertebrate on a water surface, but it is the one that evolved under genuine survival pressure. The engineering question the basilisk raises is hard enough that research groups have tried to build robots that answer it. Teams at multiple institutions have produced small robots capable of water running using principles drawn from basilisk biomechanics. Rapid leg movement, paddle-like feet creating brief air pockets, timing the recovery stroke before drag takes over. These are research prototypes. They are slow, small, and far less efficient than the animal they study. The problem is the same problem basilisk evolution solved: mass. As a water-running robot scales up, the ratio of mass to foot area shifts against it. The basilisk's solution, refined over millions of years of predation pressure in Central American riparian forest, is still ahead of the engineering. In human-modified landscape, the basilisk hasn't needed much adjustment. Irrigation canals, drainage ditches, ornamental ponds at tourist facilities. The concrete banks of human infrastructure read as functional habitat. The escape instinct that evolved along natural riverbanks triggers identically at a resort drainage channel. The basilisk doesn't assess whether a water body is natural. It assesses whether there is water and whether it can reach it. Concrete works. A hotel fountain at the right size works. This is partly why common basilisks have remained common through significant habitat modification in Central America. The core feature their survival depends on, open water with accessible banks, appears in human landscapes too. They have not adapted to humans. They have treated human infrastructure as incidental to a behavior that already existed. So now look at the run again. The same image, a basilisk hits open water at a dead sprint, feet slapping the surface, body upright, tail trailing, fringes spread. What you're watching is an animal pulling air into the water column 4 to 6 times per second, extracting just enough upward force from each collapsing pocket to keep its body above the surface, doing this for as long as mass and momentum allow, and stopping the instant it has opened enough distance between itself and whatever triggered the run. It is not crossing the river. It is slamming the door and waiting. 4 seconds later, the basilisk reaches the roots at the far bank. It climbs out, sits, chest moving, still. The water settles behind it. The predator is not there. The lizard doesn't know it just performed something that engineers with high-speed cameras and research budgets haven't fully replicated. It knows the pressure is gone. In a few minutes, it will move back into the vegetation, find a branch with good sun exposure, and begin warming up again. The run looks like a miracle. It is, by any reasonable measure, a genuinely unusual thing for a vertebrate to do. But when you trace it back through the physics, the slap, the cavity, the recovery, the temperature window, the 65 millisecond margin, the 4-meter gap that is exactly as far as it needs to go, what you find is not a miracle. You find an animal whose body is precisely shaped for a specific problem in a specific landscape, running the same calculation every time a snake moves in the undergrowth. The water doesn't hold it up. The basilisk builds the platform itself, 1 footfall at a time, and it lasts just long enough.